This half hour being brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, lots and lots of snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies, ready to drink cocktails now. Crown Royal, High Noon, Jack Daniels. And the Pickle Bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. With that, we bring in the outstanding Neal Coolong. Sir, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
As always, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is the off season. You enjoy this. There are a lot of interesting names that could be moving around the chessboard. You know, Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold, and others along the way. Aaron Rodgers, right? So how interested are you by this movement? Because last year the Vikings signed Darnold, and he gave him, for the most part, a really good season, and there was at least a payoff.
Yeah, it was a year, I think, in which the success of one free agent kind of reclamation project quarterback, it gives that sort of dangerous hope to a lot of teams. The one I think you should probably look at, and I don't know if this is more just what kind of seems obvious out in the market, but if Aaron Rodgers were to go to Vegas, play under Pete Carroll, a coach that has given quarterbacks in the past enough, but probably not too much, which is really where Rodgers is in his career. What could he do to a team that has some young talent, that's got some draft capital? Are they able to build up with a guy like that for maybe 1 year? Or is this another Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger farewell tour for him? One last season of 25+ million in salary to be fantastically mediocre, but take care of the ball. You would think that would be below average, but in the NFL, they want that stability. There are a lot of teams, a lot of franchises that want to just simply protect the ball, move where you can, try to set stuff up, but put pressure on defenses by not making mistakes. Rodgers might be able to do that. We saw at times, in one game I really watched him last year was against the Vikings, not the Vikings, the Jets. He's on the Jets. And who do they play? I totally forget. They were playing the Vikings.
Vikings.
He threw 2 just terrible interceptions in the first half. Mm-hmm. Really poor decisions, really poor execution. And he came back and played very well in the second half and put him in a position where they almost pulled out a comeback win against a very good team. He's able to do that. And I think when you look at what's below the Rodgers level, that's, as the Raiders would know, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, guys like that are going to make mistakes through 4 quarters, possibly give the game away late if it's tight and it's contested. That's really what teams are trying to do. Keep it close and see what happens. That's in some cases all you really can do. That gives Rodgers enough value that I think the Raiders, in position to draft, a Cam Ward, a Shedeur Sanders, somebody like that might not be entirely ready to go out and play on day one, but is the future and can learn from being in the room with an accomplished veteran that knows how to prepare for the game, even if their physical skills aren't really there. That seems like a move that can be made, and I would think that they would be, I don't know if inspired is the right word, but they can take some umbrage with the idea that no other quarterback is going to be able to do this. We're going to have to go with the rookie. They can bring in a veteran, put him in the right system, and build something up. For a first-year quarterback, a veteran coach a first-year coach and a veteran like Pete Carroll, that would seem to me like that would be the preferred option. So you look around, you mentioned Matthew Stafford. I don't think Stafford wants to go anywhere. I don't think the Rams want to trade him. I think he wants a contract.
No, exactly. I agree.
You take him out of it. There are still names that are going to be out there. And the Steelers had 2 of them last year. Both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are going to factor into that. And a lot of teams are going to talk themselves into the idea that they can come in and do things the right way, perhaps not be able to make big time plays, but generally speaking, protect the ball and keep their team, on schedule, drive to drive, get 23 to 27 points would be ideal, and pull out some wins. If a team is rebuilding itself, those are some pretty good options to go with. So I think Darnold performing well above and beyond that speaks well to having the best receiver in the game, having an excellent coach, setting things up for him. It might not be the same success with every single team, but you get the sense that in a bad quarterback draft, there are veteran options out there that could help a team take a step forward.
Yeah, look, your draft is set up by what you do in free agency. Were you able to fill spots that you had needs so you don't have to draft for those needs? And that's how one plays into the other, which means the combine's coming up. How do you view a combine, Neal? What is the importance to you of the combine? To me, the most important part is not the 40 time. To me, it's the part we don't see. It's the interview part.
That's the part teams are going to put the most stock into. Now, there are a few that you kind of want to get a closer look at. You think of it like this. As Chuck Noll said, watch the player, not the stopwatch. Right? I'm brutalizing that quote, something to that effect. When you see them on the field, you get a sense of how fast they can play. Running in a straight line does not give you a great sense of their athleticism as it pertains to their position on the field. Watching an offensive lineman sprint 40 yards down the field doesn't really help because of every position, and I don't think any of them really do, that's the one that absolutely is not going to run 40 yards in a straight line.
Right.
If he gets that far down the field, he will have come a long way and probably, smashed into a few objects on his way to doing that. And it's a great play overall anyway. That's a positive thing. But you do see their mechanics, the fluidity of their body motion. How well do they move through space? I've had a very high-ranking sports trainer put it to me that way before. How athleticism is defined by how effortlessly they move from one place to another. You can see that in their 40, running it itself. The time, I think there's, obviously a range. Receiver running a 4.9, might not be the guy you want to invest a first-round pick into. But it does not fully encapsulate the body of work of the player, to say nothing of the fact that you need to find a new scouting staff if you watched the guy on film and thought he was going to run a 4.4. You probably have a pretty good idea that this is not the fastest guy you're going to have on your team. Whether you want that or not is up to you. But more than anything, what they're going to do is confirm what they have heard, what their research has told them about a player, and that, as you put it, is done in the interview process. They want to talk to everybody, get to know them as people. And a lot of them, you hear about this all the time. It's always my favorite report. Whichever coach lands whichever prospect at a pro day, it gets to take them out to dinner. It's almost like whoever's choosing whoever. It's just kind of I wonder how that goes. Does Mike Tomlin walk up to him and say, "Hey, you're with me tonight"? How exactly does he flesh that out? The more popular, more charismatic coaches, you would think, probably get a little bit more of that than anybody else. Prospect gets a free dinner either way. It sounds great, right? I mean, they want to know who they are as young men, as people the franchise wants to invest millions of dollars into. They want to find out about it as much as they can about their family, their background. The only way to do that is in the interviews. And the interviews, it's not even speed dating. It's 15 minutes to go over their entire life. And it's really hard to get solid answers. I mean, could you imagine somebody like me in that process? I would spend half the time on one question. They probably wouldn't like me a whole lot. So they have to be succinct. They have to go into everything that they want to find out as quickly as they can, and then kind of figure out what's sincere, what are they really gleaning from the player. You set them up with the obvious questions. Cam Ward, what did he say the other day? You're making a mistake if you don't draft me. They all say that. It's great. I'm glad you have that kind of confidence. Somebody's going to care, to be honest. Okay. Peyton Manning said that. That's a little bit different when Peyton Manning says it to the team. Selecting one overall. Cam Ward ain't Peyton Manning. To put it mildly. I think probably a few teams are going to pass on Cam Ward. So getting to know him, though, beyond the bluster, beyond the sales pitch, what's he like as a person? Who is he going to be as a young man 3 years from now, after you've given him millions of dollars, after he's taken NFL hits, after he's gotten 2 generations of classmates that came in behind him? What type of man is he going to be? You have to figure that out in a very short amount of time, and it's obviously a very difficult decision, and one that to put it mildly, doesn't have a perfect process. I don't know if there is a way to do that. It's really just about figuring out whether or not you can work with this guy and whether or not he wants to work with you.
No question about that. Now, here's the interesting part. And we've done the Steelers are like the Atlanta Hawks part before. And I know I've asked you this question before. I may have asked it to you a year ago, but I'm going to re-ask it. Are the Steelers fans the kind of fans that are willing to just, okay, you know what? We ended up going, quote, 6-11 this year, but we're going to pick 9th or 10th or 8th in the draft. Are they willing to do that, or are they willing to keep going where they are right now?
I think it's interesting because I'm not sure those questions are mutually exclusive. I think if you were to poll the fans right now, if you take out the "we want to compete for a Super Bowl" cliche answer, more of them would probably say just tank and draft somebody good. There's a great quarterback class coming in. You know, you need to build this up again. I think they're at the point now where they're going to say that because unlike really any point in Steelers history, they have been fantastically mediocre. It's not that they've been terrible, which the franchise has been. It's not that they've been phenomenal, which the franchise has been. They've been stuck dead in the middle. And it just seems more plausible when it seems more plausible to go back than it does to go forward where they're drafting. You know, the Trae Young team every year, in the middle of the draft, you're not going to get the superstar that you need. Right. Anthony Edwards is not available at pick 16. So to get the superstar that's going to push you in a different direction, you know, logically it seems like you need to be much higher in the draft. But when you're too far down to trade up, or in a draft like this where there is the quarterback that it really makes you want to trade up 2 years worth of capital to go get him, I don't know what else you do. Could it be, you know, wait till the second round, draft Jackson Dart and throw him out there right away? I mean, I think that's a catastrophic mistake. I don't think that absolutely would solve their goal probably of drafting in the top 5 next year if that's what you want to do. Putting all of that together, I think fans in general want to see forward motion, and I'm not sure this is not the same thing that they had last year or the last 4 years. Really, I don't know how much forward motion there is for them to work, because I said this back in 2021. They've got a 4-12 roster with a 12-4 draft spot. Right. I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you reconcile that. It's a really strange position to be in. But in many ways, I think they've improved in that way. I think they have a better team than they did in 21. Mm-hmm. But it's not a whole lot better. And I'm not sure at what point all of this is going forward, because here's the thing. You want another all-pro year out of Cam Hayward. Okay, you're asking more than what science usually allows. Yeah. You know, he shouldn't have had the year that he had. I don't know how many years you've got of TJ Watt left. I think we saw the second half of the year the result of a guy that's played 1,000 snaps a season for however long now. How much better are they going to be if those players take, and logically they're going to, a step back this coming season? Then you don't have a defense anymore. I don't know how you're going to reconcile an offense that hasn't been able to get out of its own way in 4 seasons. How can you win with that? What are you going to need to do to win with that? That's kind of where they are. So it's kind of like, if this is inevitable, let's just get on with it. You know, I mean, I don't know what else there is to do, but, you know, in a way, the good news for Steelers fans is I don't think they're going to keep getting away with this. Granted, I said this 3 years ago, but at some point the other shoe's got to fall, and we're not seeing much to suggest they've got a great immediate future. Now, I really like the investments that they've made on the offensive line. Yes. I think there are things they can do in this draft to address other areas. But long term, I don't think this is going to be a great team over the next 3 seasons.
Well, he'll open the door on drafting. The question is going to be, who do they get to play quarterback for this crew? And that's going to be the part. I mean, because right now, there are ways to build a team. We talked about the free agency part. We talked about the draft part. Then, of course, there's the development part. Well, they're doing the free agent part, essentially, to build the quarterback position. And it's still shaky because, look, there are 2 guys that they have that a lot of other teams didn't want, Neal. No offense. What was the market for Justin Fields? What was the market for Russell Wilson? And after this season, what's the market for them now?
I would say Russell Wilson signed a 1-year contract, so I'm not sure how great the market was for him. I would think he would have preferred to take 3 years, $150 million somewhere. Just a hunch. I don't know him personally. Justin Fields went for, what did they give up for him? A 5, I think, which is a pick that the Steelers, it's kryptonite to them. They right. want nothing to do with 5th-round picks. Right. I remember 1 year they traded a 5th-round pick 2 years in advance. They don't draft with their 5th-round pick like ever. So that suggests the market wasn't great for a player that, probably makes a little bit more than you would want for a backup quarterback. He was, $3.5 million last season. Right. A free agent now, stands to reason he's probably going to make something in that market again, maybe a little bit more for the right team. It's a fool's errand, I think, in a lot of ways to diminish the idea of what the quarterback market is based on one player, usually set up from a couple, circumstantial pieces of evidence. What I mean by that is Russell Wilson didn't play particularly well the Steelers' last 5 games. We know that. I thought he played very well at times prior to that. I thought Justin Fields was steady, not spectacular. The market says these players are worth X. It's not, I wouldn't pay more than $2 million a year for either one of them. Well, okay, somebody's going to, because that's the price of a veteran, experienced, starting level quarterback. Now, keep in mind, there are 32 teams in the league. Every one of those teams has to have a starting quarterback. Yeah. If you don't have the prospect on the rookie contract that you're developing, or you've kind of already given the keys to, you're going to need to draft one of these guys, or you're going to need to sign one of these guys. And the market for that is surprisingly competitive. That's why it is. You have Trevor Siemian signing for $8 million a year. Mitch Trubisky signed for, $4, I think, with Buffalo. After, I'll say this until the day I die, he was the worst player in football over a 2-year span. There's absolutely no reason anybody should have wanted him back, except as a backup, obviously, but they paid market value for a backup with starting experience. That's the market that you're dipping into. So Fields and Wilson probably compete against each other, and I think we'll continue to see, the seemingly floated ideas that he could be connected here, or this is a team that likes him there. All that's going to be out there, and it's true to some degree because they have to get signed. They're going to get signed somewhere. Gardner Minshew is going to be in the NFL next season. Mm-hmm. I know that he's had ample opportunities as a starter, but he's permanently affixed to the idea that he has started games before. He knows what to do. If we have to have a backup quarterback, this is a pretty good one. If we need him to push a starter, he's in position to do that physically and in terms of his experience. I think Wilson and Fields are both getting to that point as well for what they're going to do, but they're probably going to be guys signed with the reasonable idea in mind that they could potentially start this season. That means they're probably going to be around minimum $5-6 million. I think Wilson goes for more than that. I still think the Steelers sign him to an extension.
Yeah, we'll get into the running back part next week because Harris is going to be gone. And Jaylen Warren's an interesting player. Appreciate it as always. Somehow in all this, stay warm.
I'm going to do my best. Not going to be easy, but thanks for having me, guys.
Neal Coolong, in this half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere, wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies, ready-to-drink cocktails. High Noon, Jack Daniel's, Crown Royal. Pickle Bar led by the Barrels of the Dills, indeed second to none. Here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. This dynamic half hour, if you don't mind me saying that, brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Online, sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, the best in new inventory, all with great warranties and safety features. A great pre-owned inventory, including 18 Escapes and Explorers now on the lot. And a fabulous service department that backs it up every step of the way with quick lane inspections, routine, difficult, all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. What makes the segment dynamic is that we have somebody who defines that in Nate Bauer. Sir, welcome.
Oh, wow. Thanks for having me.
You have to give me credit. I come up with a new one every time.
Yeah, no, it's eternally flattering.
You've earned it, my friend, believe me. So, a lot to talk about here. Basketball, of course, is in a tough spot. It's interesting. Michigan, for example, which is a very good team. There's no getting around it. They've won 5 in a row by a whopping total of 15 points. They have, I think the largest margin of victory is 4, but they win the games. Penn State, meanwhile, is tied for the national lead with Northwestern with 7 losses of 6 points or less. Okay. Now, also where you don't want to be. Right? Why is that?
Yeah, and should be stated, another one by 7 and another one by 8.
Yep.
Right? So, to be honest, I've lost track of the stat. I think it's 2 and 8 in games that had a differential of 2 possessions or fewer in the last 2 minutes of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's not good. That's not good. That's just the reality here, right? Is Penn State has put itself in a position to win games and it has not fallen their way. And I think that it is a mistake to paint it with too broad of a brush, right? As though Ace Baldwin is solely to blame because he's taken 3 of the last shots, right? Or that Mike Rhodes is solely to blame. They've had a few repeated situations that I think are problematic. He has laid out his resuning with timeouts remaining to not call a timeout off of a live ball. Right. That has repeated itself, I think, 3 times now, at Iowa, at Michigan, and then most recently, obviously, against Washington, where they've had the ball. They've had a last look at the basket with an opportunity to tie or win, get to the free throw line, you name it, and he has chosen not to draw something up because, to his reasoning and his rationale, they are better scoring offensively, not allowing defenses to get set up. Right? And you have to respect that. I'm not a D1 basketball head coach. I can't argue against it. I just think that given the nature of how these things have played themselves out, it may be Penn State's preference to have the ball in Ace Baldwin's hands at the end of the game. He's your best player. I don't think there's anybody denying that. But the record reflects an inability to necessarily get a good shot with the ball in his hands.
Right.
And so that's
the nice edge that you live on is, okay, you've got the ball in your best player's hands. The defense has not had an opportunity to set itself up, but the results keep repeating themselves. And so because of that, a season that had quite a bit of promise at the end of December has since, really fallen apart spectacularly.
Right. And on the timeout part of it, and I've done a few games in my career. Yeah. Okay. On the timeout part, it depends on who your personnel happens to be. If I've got a very young point guard out there running the show, I'm inclined to call one because, look, I got to tell everybody what to do here. But the problem is that, and I say this with all due respect, but if you're going to the Dick Vitale School of Coaching, where every time for years and years and years he told everybody you need a timeout, that's where everybody's getting it from. Sorry, that's just what's been reinforced to you on TV over and over again. Villanova won the national championship on the last shot of the game. Where was Jay's timeout? So it's all on the result. In hindsight, calling a timeout, I could. Why didn't they call a timeout? They lost. I got it. But nobody mentions it when Villanova gets the winner off no timeout. I mean, it's all about the result of it and who's running it at the time. Now, when Yannick juggled the ball the other day,
correct.
Okay, that point you're like, hey, maybe you need to call one here because they're not sure. Okay, so that part, I can understand that. I just don't want people to fall into the one-size-fits-all. Dick Vitale told you for 40 years you have to call a timeout there. Well, there's a reason why he's not coaching anymore. Okay. So.
And 100%. And it is simply, I think, from the perspective of, certainly from fans, but even Mike himself, right, has acknowledged It's not a hard and fast rule for him, right? It's based on feel. The issue is when that feel has created a repeating result.
Exactly. Yep.
It naturally lends itself, to being questioned for sure, but also to some self-doubt and having to live with that. I just think there is a validity to the notion, like you said, once Yannick had the ball in his hands, shot selection in terms of ace, right? He's not a 3-point shooter, and so for that to be the last look that you get, I think it's a hard argument to make that's the best shot that you could have gotten in those scenarios.
Yep.
But at the same time, you understand that the best 3-point shooter you have is Zach Hicks, and Big Ten defenses have figured him out. They have painted themselves on him. He's not free to take that shot. You have to give them credit, honestly, for pushing the ball to Yannick. The design off of that 1-on-1 miss was not to have Ace shoot it. It was to have Yannick shoot it.
That's
and
right.
he couldn't handle it.
That's
so
right.
It's like you said. It is. It's just a tough place to be in for the program when the results have repeated themselves the way that they have, because you can't you just can't deny that, right? I mean, on probability alone, you don't anticipate having that much of an avalanche of failure in that moment spread out over the course of the season.
And that's the. I mean, do you want to know how many games have been lost after calling a timeout? A whole bunch. You want to know how many games have been lost not calling a timeout? A whole bunch. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to either one. And because it's happened repeatedly, I completely respect fans sitting there saying, you got to call a timeout, because they're seeing the same result without calling it. Meanwhile, Mike has a career where he's won 72% of those games in his career where he hasn't done it. So like he's had success doing it that way, but the fans here haven't seen it. because he's only been here 2 years. So I mean, I could totally understand it. This is where I'm seeing it right now. Where I'm seeing it is in two areas, beyond the keeping the ball in front, things like that. To me, Penn State is not winning the middle eight. They're getting leads in the first halves of games and squandering the leads in the last 4 minutes, and then not regaining momentum in the opening 4 minutes of the second half. That middle eight has really hurt them. And the other part is, and this is part Penn State, and it's part with the officiating, but part Penn State. The Oregon game is a great example. Penn State has been in 10 of these, 11 of these games? 11 games? And this is a stat I keep, so this is all on me for keeping this stat. In close games this year, Penn State has only 44 free throw attempts in the final 4 minutes. That's it. I mean, that defies explanation to me in some ways, because they're 82% in those 44. They're 82%. That's where you should be able to extend leads, put games away, get yourself back in it, and they're not getting to the line. Now, Oregon's a good example where the last 5 possessions, they didn't deserve to get to the line. They took bad shots. But a lot of other times, I've had my doubts about a couple things I'm seeing in terms of how it's being called, with Michigan absolutely being one of them.
Yeah, it's this tricky line of ace. Right, they've been in the double bonus quite a few times where they've settled for a 3-point shot.
Yep.
There have been opportunities to pick up fouls on them. Now, granted, you're trusting that you're going to get the call in that situation, and guess what? That's a tough call to get. Ace has not been treated, I think it is fair to say, as though he is one of the better point guards in the league, certainly, or the country as a scoring guard. And so that frustration has been in his body language really throughout the calendar year.
Yeah.
Certainly it was the case against Indiana. I mean, I can think off the top of my head lots of times where he has not pursued that course of action because there's no rationale behind it. Right? If you've developed this muscle memory of not getting the call in that circumstance, then yeah, you're probably going to shy away from it. But it's just this double-edged sword of that shot for him is not the best shot for the team.
Right.
The best approach, like you said, they shoot a ton of free throws and they make a ton of free throws. He makes a ton of free throws. But if you're going to settle for a 3-point shot in that circumstance, you have to live with the result if it doesn't go in. That's and right. Percentages wise, it's not a good percentage for him. So it's just it has been a tough slog for this team, of which it has had lots and lots of opportunities that it just hasn't been able to capitalize on. And a big part of this is sort of piggybacking on what you're saying, not getting, like, it goes without saying, hey, don't be behind by 2 points at the end of the game in the first place.
That's right.
Why have you gotten into that situation where a late run has put you in a do or die place where you have to make a play, as opposed to being able to simply maintain and close out the lead that you already have, which is something that they have done multiple times this season, including Northwestern, including Rutgers.
Yeah. No, and that's like, for example, in the Michigan game, you have a ball that's knocked out of bounds. Now, it may have been the right call, but they asked for them to look at it. That's the only time all season I've seen the officials say, no, we're not going to look at it.
Yeah.
But they'll look at a potential flagrant with 2 seconds to go in a 40-point game. Like, what are you doing? Right? Hey, wouldn't look at it. It's the same official, because then they come down and Danny Wolf really belted Nick. And that was the end of the court where our broadcaster was, because we could see it plain as day. There's no call. Right? Now, that doesn't mean Nick's going to make the free throws. It does not. But you see stuff like that, and you're like, what are you doing here? you got to review it. You may have gotten it right to begin with, but at least review it. The other one you totally got wrong. But then you go to the Oregon game, and it's Penn State's fault on shot selection why they didn't get to the line there, because their shots did not deem that you should get to the line, and they never passed the ball the last 5. I mean, and I'm not joking about that. The only pass was the inbounds pass to the person who caught it and brought it up the floor and took the shot. They didn't pass the ball once in their last 5 possessions against Oregon. That's on them for how they played it.
Yep. It's again. It's just you get into this, and it's the easy thing to do is to paint with a broad brush and to say, oh, it's this one thing.
No.
And it hasn't been one thing. Yes, officiating has been involved. Yes, shot selection, play selection. Yes, choice of, in Mike's case, choice of timeout when Yannick bobbles it to get a baseline out of bounds, right, and set yourself up with 11 seconds to play. All of those things contribute, and look, it's just it's just a tough spot, because if that's the case, if it is this litany of things, it still all points to the same thing, which is not being able to succeed in those moments.
Yep.
Right? Like
Yep.
It changes the dynamic from being unlucky to okay, there's something to this.
Yep.
Right? This is problematic for this team specifically, on top of all of the other things that have gone wrong for them this season.
Yeah. And again, so everybody understands. Nate just talked about all the things I talked about. I think that's a fair analysis. This game, it's your fault. This game, we talked about the timeout part of it. In this game, did I say all 3 games were officiating? Nope. I mentioned one game where it played a role. The other 2, I didn't say that. Right? I think it's pretty fair.
Yep.
Well,
onwards and upwards.
well, I mean, people say, "What do you do now?" And I say, "I get ready for the next game." So it's my job to talk about the next game. Stan Drayton, running backs coach, got a chance to talk to him yesterday for a little bit. Speaks very highly of you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, everybody does. But it seems on the surface like a pros higher. What's your thought on it?
Very much so. I think it is a. I mean, look, I understand how this sounds. You lose a guy in Jaywan Sider who has been around the program for forever and is trusted and has a record of success. But if that's going to happen, for you to replace him with a guy who has, indisputable evidence of his success in producing running backs toward the NFL, in the NFL, I think it is a perfect marriage of timing for this program. Older guys, how reasonable is it to expect Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to have to maximize the juice that can be squeezed out of them in the 4th year hearing the same voice? And that is no knock on Jaywan. It is simply a matter of, hey, here's a different perspective. You've already got this outstanding foundation that even if you don't get a smidge better, you're still a mid-round NFL draft pick. Both of those guys.
Right.
Okay. How about add this guy's eyes to the equation? What changes? What different perspectives can he bring that might tweak things just that hair more? Right? It is always such a fascinating dynamic of having the conversation about it. It's not always about the dramatic improvement, right? Penn State's defense with Jim Knowles. Tom Allen had a top 20 defense last year. Mm-hmm. It was a great defense.
Yep.
Okay. What if you can make that top 20 defense top 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Stan Drayton, what if you can make 2 outstanding running backs who were wildly successful coming down the stretch run, give them both a healthy offseason, right? Where they both have an opportunity to get faster, stronger, all of the developmental stuff that goes into it with his perspective on top of it. I just think it bodes extremely well for closing the gap, right? For finding wins in the margin, which is really what winning is all about when you get to this stage of their success as a program.
Yeah. And look, here's a guy that's been at that level. He can tell them all the things that you do without the ball to make you valuable at the next level, because we all know what your value is with the ball. There's a lot that goes into it. He knows. All right, my friend, outstanding as always. I think the dynamic introduction, to your credit, you exceeded it.
Oh, man. Well, listen, I just try to live up to the host, so.
Oh, well, our praise to Todd on that. All right, thanks so much. Appreciate you, my friend. See you later.
All right, see ya. Bye.
This half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.